Evening all on Play Chess and streaming to YouTube. Okay, this week I thought we would look at some interesting European Cup games. So some interesting chess being played there in the European Cup. Just going to check something, just 1 second. On stream. Okay, I hope the board's okay. Right. Yes, so European Cup. So some very exciting players in the European Cup, all played in it. The first game I'd like to check out is Alexander Grischuk against Maxim Rodshtein. Hi Thomas on the stream. Someone from my Muswell Hill Chess Club is on stream as well. Very, very great player. So British Championship player. So yeah, chip in if there's anything interesting you want to say, Thomas. So Alexander Grischuk against Maxim Rodshtein. So it started off with knight f3, and Rodstein playing black played d5. So Grischuk, this wasn't the most adventurous theoretical debate ever in history of chess, because now I've played g3. So this is like a reverse King's Indian defense at the moment. So black is reacting to this fianchetto bishop, wants to blunt the bishop. So it seems logical to play c6. All logical so far. Bishop g2, put the bishop outside of the pawn chain, so that e6, we're not locking that bishop in. Seems logical. We see the move c4 straight off the bat now. And actually I'll put on like a bit so here. Stockfish. So c4. I think black, if he wanted to play it really safe, could just try e6 here. He doesn't have to take that pawn necessarily. I don't think anything terrible will happen on e6. I think queen b3, black has queen b6. That should be okay. Maybe a slight advantage to white. I don't know. Knight a6. But anyway, it wasn't played. So d takes c4 was played by Maxim Rodshtein. And we have knight a3. So that knight is cheekily doing this while the bishop can't take it and double the pawns. e5. Now knight takes c4. Okay. Now black played e4. And yeah, it's starting to be quite an original looking position. Knight fe5 is played here. Knight fe5. So what is going on here? Why aren't these knights kind of wobbling around a bit too much here? Say black played f6. Doesn't that look as though that's dangerous? Apparently, it doesn't matter here. White has knight e3, hitting the bishop, and actually gives the square to the fellow knight. Okay, so actually black didn't test that. So queen c7. And now we see d4. It's in this position here that f6 was played, and we see this knight e3 resource hitting that bishop. So gaining time for that c4 square now. So strange opening, but the outcome is that this pawn looks vulnerable actually. That's the real outcome here. The knights have been wandering around. You could argue they've been creating weaknesses. So we see black supporting that e4 pawn with f5, and I'll be pretty sure that the player with black must be out of book. In fact, both players must be out of the book. This looks like quite an original position here. So white castled, knight f6, and now a logical looking move f3 to try and hit this pawn chain hard. Now if black just ignores that, I'm not sure that's particularly good. The engine suggests white's doing well here. If bishop e7, then f takes, and we can actually play knight d2, and that's a goner, that e4 pawn. So black actually took actually on f3, and we have rook takes f3, so exposure on f5 now. So it's quite useful pressure. g6. Now a very energetic move indeed is played here. What would you play as white if you had this position and I gave you 20 seconds starting from now? So white to play here. Any ideas? An energetic move is played here. So white's play, give you some time to digest this. If you want to play chess, if you move away from the score sheet tab, so we can play these guess the move games, by the way, that'd be really cool. Alright, any ideas? I'm going to show you now. Okay, it wasn't D5, actually it was G4. Actually the engine likes G4 now at a certain depth. It actually likes G4 at a certain depth now, 17. So what's going on with G4? Well, if we take, I think we just take that knight on F6, that's one thing, without a penalty. So we see F4, and now we see the move G5. So knight H5, and with that knight not eyeing D5 now, we see D5 hitting that bishop again. Strange game. Very interesting now, this D5, very tactical all of a sudden. C takes D5, knight takes D5, so you'll notice that this knight seems to be hanging. But actually check was played. Check was played here. Now, if we... let's just examine this for a moment. If we take that, then rook c3 is pretty nasty here. I think we're going to have knight c7 after. But if we try and stop that with check, I don't think it matters. This is still a strong position with the check here. And apparently here just bishop d2 or queen f1. And this could be good for white. So okay, so this little trick, so with rook c3 for knight c7's there. So queen c5 check was played, and white, from an engine point of view, now has an advantage after this move, which looks strange as well. So should that be taken? Bishop g7 is to be considered. Apparently that might be a move, but it is actually taken here. This might be a mistake actually. It seems yeah, it's a bit greedy maybe. B4, and a point here is if queen takes d5, then we have rook takes f8 check, winning the queen. And the other point is, you know, rook takes e3 is coming to pin the bishop. So we see queen d6, rook takes e3, and here now white is threatening taking, and then knight c7 check to fork queen and king. So this is actually a troublesome position now for black. Well, let's have a look here. If king f7, apparently bishop b2, looking at the rook, that's pretty dangerous. For example, like this, there's check here, and this looks like big trouble. For example, like that, crashing through with that knight forking. So a very dangerous position indeed here. Black tried knight a6, but we still had this bishop b2. So this piece sacrifice, with the king still in the center and the rook now looked at. Black tries bishop g7, but now on move 22, knight f6 check actually looks at the queen as well here, and black actually resigned in this position. So why did black resign? Let's have a look here. So very interesting how this ended in 22 moves from such a quiet opening choice. If king e7, then taking here, check, and in this position we have that immobilized piece, that pin we celebrate with rook d7 check, and then after taking here, this is a very dominating position for white. In fact, this knight and rook seem awkward. to white threatening this, but there's other ideas as well, like here to here, with a sort of mating net. So yeah, it was quite a devastating, crush in the end. After this check, yeah, black actually resigned that. If we look again at this and consider another move, I don't think this really helps anything that black does here. If king c7, we can still just take here its overwhelming position. So yeah, that was a very interesting game from Grischuk, starting with knight f3. So it just shows Grischuk, plays slightly offbeat in this game with the knights, but he has actually created a weakness here. Maybe he's created a weakness, and it's not so easy, because of this knight e3 on that bishop. This position, he's creating some more weaknesses on the diagonal. Really, the pawns are not able to go backwards. So e4 is weak, and then he hit that and open up this f file. So very great play from white. G4 very energetic on the f file, and this g5 to knock out the knight to play d5. You might think if knight d5 here instead of knight h5, don't think that matters. Knight takes, we're winning that f4 pawn. In fact, here we can even, apparently we can take this and offer that knight again for rook e3. This is strong in this position, with an idea of rook c1 as well for rook c8. For example, okay, so say bishop g7, well, we can take there. So if king f7, rook c1, let's have a look at this. The rook coming to the 7th rank looks very strong. This looks like a devastating attack anyway, with the king so exposed. Here, bishop e5 or queen c1, these are dangerous possibilities. So white's got various threats here or here. So the king's really exposed in this game. Yeah, it's quite a neat game, that's why I chose it. So yeah, that knight h5, so knight d5 doesn't seem to fare that well. But the opening up, the whole opening up of the centre here, does spell disaster, it seems. If the king had just moved like there, queen takes d5 is possible here, and black's doing fantastically. So yeah, very good move here to play this knight ce3. That's absolutely necessary move in this position, because it's important that rook takes f8 is possible to defend here. So after taking, b4 became possible. I think on bishop takes e3, this is okay for white, but it's not as strong as what was played. Actually, b4 is apparently one of the strongest moves. So we're still leveraging this rook takes f8 trick, but we're opening up this very dangerous diagonal. So fantastic game here from white. After check it was resigned. So yeah, very interesting game. Okay, let's go on to another game. Okay, so Fabiano Caruana, the man of the moment in the chess world, I think, after his fantastic performance in the Swinkels Cup. So he was playing against Peter Robertson. Thomas, I wonder, there's a Robertson that plays for Muswell Hill Chess Club who's an IM, and this guy's 2403. Is it possible that our own Peter Robertson played in the European Cup against Caruana? I think, maybe it's some other Robertson, but Peter T. Robinson was 2403 here, and I suspect he might be a Muswell Hill Chess Club player on the list anyway. So anyway, knight f3 from Fabiano, knight f6, c4, so English opening, we see b6, okay, g3, bishop b7, bishop g2, a quiet start again, g6, double fianchetto from black, d4, bishop g7, both sides castle, and now we see from Fabiano a space gainer, d5. It seems, well, it blunts the bishop. Obviously, potentially, there's a knight maneuver to c5 or something, or that you think these squares could be used. We see knight e4. Okay, so discouraging knight c3 clearly. Okay, we see queen c2, f5. Already this, I'll be concerned with black having to play f5 here. But anyway, let's see rook d1, c6. And now the move knight d4 is played. Okay, so white is now threatening actually just to nab a pawn with takes. Just cheekily nab a centre pawn. It doesn't matter about the slight weaknesses. I think overall that is threatened. Black took here on d5 and took again on d5, inviting knight takes f5. So we've got this attack here. And we've also got this thing going on the diagonal. So after rook takes f5, I think here, I don't think this would be very good. I think black always has rook c5 here, yeah, to hit the queen. So the way Fabiano played it here was just simply bishop takes e4. So actually it's equal on pawns right now. And actually, from an engine point of view, it's just about equal this position. So you could say the opening's been okay, I think, for black so far. Knight c6, protect the rook, get developed. Knight c3, e6, might be slightly dubious e6. It weakens some dark squares. You'd think in principle it's dubious. But what to do about this pressure on the d file? White's going to build up with bishop f4, and it looks very comfortable. So what does black actually want to do here? It's difficult. The engine is suggesting queen e8 actually. So bishop f4, maybe rook c8. But anyway, let's go with the game continuation. e6. I just don't like it because it weakens the dark squares in principle. But let's see what happened. Bishop f4 is if the bishop's going to sit immediately with bishop d6 or rook d6 on that d6 square. Rook c8, rook d6. So yes, it looks uncomfortable now because white's going to double, but still I think it's this next move which might be slightly weakening. Apparently, you know, maybe bishop f8 and that's okay, but actually this move g5 was played. That's a little bit suspicious because it kind of weakens light squares in black's camp and around his king. But let's see, bishop e3, knight e5. As though knight c4 is quite a serious idea to hit b2 and d6. Rook ad1, so putting pressure now on d7. Any knight c4, we've got rook takes d7. So black here plays queen f8. Now an invasionary move, queen b7. So yes, threatening that a7 pawn, and black actually lets it go here. It's actually difficult to do something about this. This is not good news. If rook a8, what would you play as white here? There's actually an interesting dynamic move to consider. I'll just show you actually. Rook takes d7 from an engine point of view anyway is apparently good. White is threatening now rook takes and queen takes. This didn't happen. This is just a variation. So if takes here, you know, there's very good compensation on dark squares. I think there's things like bishop d4 and rook takes h7. So anyway, this didn't happen. Black actually gave up the a7 pawn rather than allowing this. Well, it seems to be quite a dangerous exchange sack. So rook f7 was played. And in this position, actually, it does seem possible just to take this pawn, apparently. Just taking that pawn would be interesting. Any rook takes f2. I think that rebounds bishop f4. That's not so hot for black. But that wasn't taken here. We see knight e4. So maybe the knight wants to take it instead. h6, it's protected, but we see these light square weaknesses are reproducing in black's position. So bishop d4 now, very strong move actually, bishop d4, just wanting to take off the defender for d7, because we've got everything on d7 right now. Rook c2, now that is taken for rook takes d7. Okay, so in this position, if rook takes e2, then rook takes here is strong because of check, and here rook d7 skewing the queen, so that's not particularly pleasant. So after rook takes d7, black actually is quite badly off in this position, but has got that c7 square, and he uses that with rook c7. We see rook takes f7 hitting black's queen, queen takes, and now we see this check, and here, okay, the knight's quite good on e4, protecting things. We see b3 just getting the pawns off the dark squares. Rook d7, rook c1, rook c7. We have an exchange of rooks. Queen e8, putting pressure on black. Queen c2, and now yeah, black's king is very vulnerable here. We see a series of checks, check here, check there, and in this position now threatening a mate with knight f6, potentially, no sorry, queen g8, that's covering h7, queen g8, or queen f8 is another mate threat, so forget that one. That's protected, so queen g8 or queen f8 threatened. Black tries queen c1 check here, queen c6 check, now e4, so the knight's protecting that e4, so we've got these two now. Black now is in a bad way. He took on f6, queen takes. Now after check here, we see now queen g6 protecting this pawn, and he's going to win this pawn. And the pawns are going, actually, black's pawns are actually going, they're dropping off here. So he resigns here. It's not a very nice position to play on. So even though it's only just a pawn, but there's other pawns about to drop off here, so black resigned. So that was a 39 mover. The 2400 lasted 39 moves against Fabiano Caruana, who's 28.01 at the time of this game. So yeah, positional game against the double fianchetto. So yeah, it's seems there was a bit of pressure on the D file, and Fabiano, these weaknesses, you know, they're bound to tell at some point against a really good player. They're often going to tell, aren't they? But I think a key maneuver actually here in this position, a very key maneuver to get rid of that defensive knight. That was the best thing in black's position. On this bishop d4, you know, the engine's just bishop d4 here. If, I don't know, knight c4, let's try knight c4, then bishop takes, and then we've got rook takes here. So yeah, everything was on that d7. So it was a nasty position to be in after losing that d7, because then e6 was weak. The knight was really quite good. So yeah, big problems. Okay, let's go on to another game. So Fabiano Caruana again, another interesting game of his. So he was playing black here against Robin Swinkels. So d4, and we saw g6. g6 immediately, so inviting up here, it's so e4, bishop g7, knight c3, and it looks as though it's going to be some sort of weird hypermodern system. It could be a hippopotamus maybe, or it could just be a quick b5 like Perk systems. And in fact, after f4 we see b5, knight f3, d6. So bishop e3, so hypermodern style. And actually, just a little tidbit here. And the Singfield Cup, it seems Fabiano, for the first 7 rounds which he won, he never had a single fianchetto bishop. That was noticed by some people, that maybe he plays more classically sometimes, and that's his real strength, classical rather than hypermodern. But this is definitely in hypermodern territory, this setup here for black. It's inviting white to occupy the centre and try and strike at it. D4 is the square to really try and put pressure on. We see knight d7, bishop d3, and now c5 hitting that d4 square. Okay, so white is tempted forward with e5, slightly weakening these squares, b4, knight e4, and this f5 can be used, knight h6. And you might think, isn't black losing this d6 pawn here? I'm not sure this is entirely good to win the d6 pawn. Let's have a quick check. White didn't play this, but if he did, knight f5, hitting the bishop, c takes d4. Yes, that's horrible. Black has succeeded here in destroying white's centre. Any g4 kick, there might be knight e3, and anything like this, I think we've got queen b6 potentially. We've got a pleasant position here anyway. Here, this is very pleasant. It's just too many weaknesses. You wouldn't do this as white. So basically, forget e takes d6. White played d takes c5 though. D takes e5, and now c6. This looks interesting. The engine's point of view is f takes e is playable here. On f takes e, as an example, if knight takes e5, this would be a mistake. Knight takes e5. I think this knight's hanging. Pardon me, knight's hanging. Okay, so yeah. After this knight h6, d takes c5. Yeah, you don't want to unleash that bishop. So here, but yeah, this was played, but not f takes e. So f takes e looks. Why didn't white play this? I mean, okay, if knight g4, maybe he's worried about knight g4. Okay, this does look very, very worrisome for white to allow knight g4. Apparently e6 might be a move. I like this. I don't know, but it looks as though black should be better here. Okay, so anyway, so white played this c6, and the knight actually just went back. So looking at c6, but also again we've got knight g4 or knight f5 to hit the bishop. Knight takes e5. Here now, queen c7 was played. Just maybe to play knight c6 next. Queen f3. I don't think we can take now on c6 here. Or no, we can, but he didn't. Caruana just castled here. What he has achieved from the opening, I know it's a bit of a mess, but what he has achieved, he's got that f5 square. The bishop seems blocked in. The pawn seems to be going. Once the pawn goes, we've got the c file. So I think the prospects for black look good potentially. We see bishop c4 here. Knight takes c6. Bishop d5. Black's better now after this. In fact, bishop c4 was regarded as a slight mistake. White should have apparently just castled. If we take here, then this is okay after knight f6 check. Winning the queen or the rook. If it takes, we win the rook, and white's okay here. So this maybe castling was best if white castled, but this seems to be plummeting white's advantage. It seems black's already better by more than a pawn, nearly over 1.5 pawns, just playing bishop c4 instead of castling, believe it or not. So, and this looks like the best move. Knight takes. So bishop d5, even worse now. after knight takes e5, takes bishop g4. So this is just the target on that d file. Surely queen f2, rook ad8. It's just wasted time, I think. It goes back now, wasting more time. So white still hasn't castled, and there's still pieces that are loose in the center. It looks like a total disaster. Because also factor in this diagonal. So queen takes e5. The knight moves back, and here actually it looks as though, you know, black's got various good moves here. What he does play is bishop d7. This is one of the top moves apparently to play. I'm just wondering about this. I think that might be okay as well. But bishop d7. Okay, now if white castled here, let's just take that for sake of argument, then the point is knight g4. So that's the painful point. White can't actually castle here without allowing knight g4 now after this bishop retreat. It also seems black might be plotting bishop b5 at some point as well, among other things, or taking on b2. Okay, so we see queen f4. And now black just takes on f4, and he wants to take on b2. So he's just nabbed the pawn. White's just in a shattered position. 2 pawns down right now. And it doesn't matter about this knight here. We're just taking this rook. We're going to be like still 2 pawns up. So we see rook d1, check. And okay, so 2 pawns up. Bishop c6. With pressure, bishop takes, a couple of rooks come off, b takes. Now that's ignored, rook e1, check, and now king f8. So is white going to do something? He's 2 pawns down, a bit depressing. Rook e3. Okay, that g2 is taken. So okay, now still 2 pawns down. Knight f5, and it looks as though knight d4 might be useful actually. So that's taken off, but after g takes, white actually resigned here. He didn't want to play this on particularly. I think it's looking pretty bad, 2 pawns down. As an example, I don't think, maybe we can just be convinced it's winning for black. It's not particularly happy for white, this position to play on. So yeah, a hyper-modern system there from Fabiano. Let's have a look at that again. So he started off with g6. So he hadn't fianchettoed any bishops in the Singfield, but here in the European Cup he's playing more adventurously with the black pieces. And he did seem to provoke white significantly. This first provocation does weaken f5 a bit. And I think the worst thing though about this was the bishop maneuvers, which seemed to waste time coming up. Bishop c4. In retrospect, it's easy to say these things. Bishop d5. So yes, the bishop, after bishop g4 hitting the queen, is a target now. Bishop d7, threatening knight g4 if white castled. Okay, so yeah, black was good there. So the hyper-modern stuff worked. Okay. Let's go on to another game. Actually, I'm making this slightly shorter today. Haven't got such a big selection of games. Yeah, because I got a bit of a croaky throat, so please excuse this as the last game to look at. This is Nakamura against Martin Damscher. Okay. Nakamura was playing white and played e4. After e5 we have knight c3, as though this is like the Vienna game. So I've often played f4 here, which is the Vienna game. If we look at live book, connect to live book here, f4 is the 4th most popular actually. More popular is just knight f3 or G3 or bishop C4. These are all more popular actually than F4. Nakamura chooses bishop C4, bishop C5, D3, and there's a naughty little trick here because black mirrors that, but white is in a position to nab this bishop now, and does so with knight A4. So white is nabbing this bishop, dark square bishop. There's no escape. There's no hole for that bishop to go back to. So we see bishop B6. Any check is futile as well, because I think we just play C3 and we're getting that bishop with B4. So that bishop's a goner if white wants it. So the bishop just retreated here, and we saw Nakamura taking it, and now not blocking in the F pawn, playing instead knight E2, so F4 is still playable, knight C6. But interestingly, okay, black might be liberating with D5, and in fact we see the knight coming to safeguard now against D5. So it seems okay, a bit of an odd looking maneuver, but it's idea to control D5. And now black goes for white's bishop with knight A5. Just a moment there. If A3, I don't think this is a big scary thing for black if white preserves the bishop necessarily. It's just another game. Apparently it's not a big deal. I think the thing is black might be coming up with D5 later. So there's a choice of like lesser evil to either control the D5 square or keep this bishop. So he wanted to control the D5 square. This is the decision. Let the bishop go. And in fact it doesn't even matter about the double pawns because it helps control that D5 square. We see bishop G5 and black did take, so white's definitely in control of D5 now. Even with that pin as well, there's no dark square bishop to contest the pin that easily. Bishop E6, B3, H6, the bishop drops back here. G5, bishop G3. Now H5, threatening to trap the bishop. H4, G4. Okay, white's okay apparently here, from engine point of view, slightly okay, better even. Queen D2. Queen E7, and we see A4 clamping down on B5, Rook G8, and white castles queenside. I think with these double pawns it's difficult for black to arrange anything too dangerous. Black castles queenside as well. King B2, and this looks as though now white could actually use the A file to attack black's king after King B2. Bishop D7, Rook A1, Bishop C6, putting pressure on E4, Rook HE1, King D7 evacuating in advance of A5. Okay, Rook E2, Rook A8. So everything still seems mostly in balance right now. Seems mostly in balance. We see the move Queen E1. As though there might be an idea of F4 later for E5 to push through with E5. Queen E6. That could be one idea. Rook D1. Okay, after King C8, Rook E3. So what is white up to? Maybe F4 is on the cards. Knight D7. F3. Not yet. Knight C5. It's here. Not allowing the en passant now with that pawn. So going slowly for F4. That's played. E takes, bishop takes. And black now surrounds that E5 square as though the knight could maybe use it one day, or it's not as though, so E5 is off, being put off from black now. We see Rook, a very interesting move though, is played in this position which celebrates the battery. We see Rook D5 looking at H5. Now I think it will be very bad news for black to take this. I suspect after E takes, say here there's Rook E7, and this is bad news. here protecting that back row, but knight b5 we're on c7, and this rook's out of the game there. So this position is disastrous for black. This position here, for example, there's enough compensation. The knight's going to come back, d6 is going to be weak. So that sort of disaster is avoidable just by not taking the rook. So black played actually rook h8 here, just protecting h5. Now we have bishop h2. So black's not in serious trouble from an engine point of view here though, at the moment. Knight d7. Maybe that was slightly dubious. Apparently, maybe taking was okay there, but anyway. So knight d7. We see rook f5, and white might be in the driving seat now because knight d5 is on the cards. That looks like a big knight. It's coming to d5. King b8. But here, actually, the knight, instead of going to d5, knight d5 here does look attractive, but maybe black just takes. Instead, we see knight e2. So knight f4 would fork the queen in h5. Queen e8. Now knight d4 is played. Queen g6. And actually, yeah, if you're an attacking player, you look at the pawn chain around the king, or if you're an engine, you brute force this and you find a brilliant move anyway without any consideration for anything. But there's actually a tactical move here which the engine picks up already in this position. Apparently, this is strong. Apparently, bishop takes d6, just to wreck the pawn chain. If c takes, queen b4. And is that pawn going? If we play this, knight e6 check, we're winning that pawn. It seems to wreck black. It seems pretty bad. This position, this sort of position, is pretty bad. For example, like this, and it's looking bad. But anyway, that wasn't played at the moment. Not yet. Bishop takes d6 was not played here. We see white building up for that with queen b4. Now it's here that this could have actually been stopped. This bishop takes d6 is interesting, but black could have actually played knight e5 to put a stop to that, and apparently it's only slightly better for white. But black maybe underestimated this idea or didn't see it. Instead of knight e5, black actually played rook e8. Okay, it seems to threaten the e4 pawn. If white played a passive move, yeah, it wouldn't be very nice at all. But, you know, white did play bishop takes d6 now. So letting e4 go even. So first of all, let's have a look now. This one, which wasn't played, there's check. And it sort of crumbles black's king, this position here. As well as getting the piece back anyway. So that's not very nice. So instead, bishop takes e4 was played, which does mean that, well, the bishop's attacking the rook here. Now in this position, apparently, apparently there's a very good move for white. In the game, Nakamura played rook f2 here. Funny enough, he played rook f2, which is good for white. I wonder if you can spot another move which might be a good idea here. What would you play as white in this position if I gave you 20 seconds, starting from now? So white's play better than Nakamura's move. The engine picks it up. So white's play, can you do better than Nakamura's move from a technical perspective? What would you play here as white? It's interesting because we've got this pressure on c7. Now, if we try knight b5, I think apparently black is okay here after queen takes. Believe it or not. Nope. Maybe the engine's actually changing its mind. No, it did actually change its mind there. It initially said black would be okay here after this, but after knight takes c7, it reckons that white's doing really well. So even knight b5 looks dangerous. If king c8, we just take here. If king a7, we play the check, and we play c5 apparently. So with queen c4 coming, and this is mega dangerous. So takes, we've got mate in 3 here. And if black doesn't take, then this queen c4 apparently, it's a bit chaotic. But even knight b5, yeah, it seems this is a very strong position with that bishop pinning that pawn. So knight b5 might actually be a really good move. The other engine move, well, the engine move suggested was actually rook takes e4. So a quick look at this. Rook takes e4. So taking out the bishop first, and now knight b5 is also apparently, this is really strong apparently. This is more clear cut because black's getting mated in 2 after that one. So that's more clear cut there. And what does black do here about c7? If rook a5, we can take here. It seems to be an overwhelming position. Taking here, we're winning lots of pawns. So that looks interesting. There's a lot of pawns here, and yeah, white's material up by about 2 pawns. So yeah, it seems rook takes e4 might be even stronger for knight b5. It seems strong, but Nakamura, he played this rook f2, and still knight b5 is on the cards. Black played f5, so the queen's actually hitting the bishop now after f5, potentially. Or there's queen f6 or c takes to consider. We see bishop g3. So again, knight b5 is still lurking there just to put pressure on c7. That is a pressure point. Black now played rook a5, and we finally get to see this knight b5 now. Knight e5 fending off that diagonal. And here, this is Nakamura, brilliant tactically. Now in this position, the knight is controlling the escape square of the king, so potentially there's a weak back row. I want to give you this clue. There's potentially a weak back row, and actually he does finish beautifully this game. It reminds me of an Alexander Alekhine type tactic in a different position, yeah, this is a wonderful finish. If you could calculate this to the end, you're pretty good tactically. I'll start you off. Shall I? Or not? How can you imagine getting access to the first rank here? What would you play in this position? Any goes on the first move? It is actually a neat combinatory finish here to witness, I believe. So white to play here and win. It's a crushing move. It's more than +5, this move. What would you play? Okay. Right, the first move, let's set it off, is rook takes e4. I hope you all got that. So that's the first move. So it opens up that rook in theory for the first rank. F takes for the 8th rank. Now bishop takes e5 to deflect the rook away. And the neat point is I did actually get this when playing through the game yesterday, how this would finish after this actually. Check, rook e8, and how does white finish now, the final move? White to play and win in this position. It's a real crushing move, which you have to see really to make this all work. Note also black is now threatening check to win the rook as well. So white to play. What does white play here? Finishes off the game. Move 41. Remember, we've got a7 control from the knight for temporary advantage there, controlling a7. And there's a quotation in chess: the power of the pinned piece is illusionary. I think illusory. Morozevich. The power of the pinned piece is an illusion. Yeah. Okay. The pinned piece, power is illusion. So we've got queen e7. Yeah. So that's winning. It's stopping even queen g7 as well. So if takes, you know, it's because we've got mate in 1 after. If takes, we just win. Well, takes a rook up after. Yeah, that was a great finish. So queen e7. So let's have a quick breeze through that game again. So bishop c4. I might try this in my own games. I keep thinking the Vienna here is attractive, but actually, yeah, this is a more popular move. Bishop c4 apparently is more popular. Most popular is just knight f3. But okay, so bishop c4. So this is Vienna game with knight f6 sidelines. So yeah, nabbing the bishop, and then not worrying about one's own light square bishop being nabbed. So something about this position is interesting coming up. That when both sides castle, well, black couldn't really consider castling over here. He's got huge weaknesses, which would finish him off surely. If black castled over here, in fact, queen h6 and then f4 later, well, looks dangerous anyway. Or f takes and then f6. So forget that. Yeah. So black castled over there on the queen side. So white's got this dangerous looking plan to play for a5, and then white, I think, has a long-term plan of putting pressure on black's pawn chain. So he slowly prepares f4. Now in this position, when there was a chance for g takes, that might have been the best move actually from an engine point of view. Taking this, there might have been a point to this. Maybe here there's a point with rook g4, and black might have been doing great. So white would have to be careful. But no, white, that rook wasn't activated here, so there was no pressure on e4 from the side. So f4 was got in much freer of charge, and basically that means scrutiny on the pawn chain here. And we saw this lovely rook d5. But trouble really set in with this knight maneuver coming up. So the pawn chain under great scrutiny, these two in particular, after queen b4. So in fact it did seem as though bishop takes d6 was even possible in this position. Even in this position it was possible, because here it's like troublesome with knight e6 check. So if that's not possible, that pawn's like dropping off. So yeah, but in principle it still remains an issue for black. So Nakamura went slowly for that bishop d6, although there's an opportunity for black to have played knight e5. He didn't do that. He played this, just maybe overlooking the power of bishop takes d6. So we have this bishop takes e4, maybe the lure of this rook here. But yeah, in this position, it seems c7's almost fatal after rook takes, and knight b5, that wasn't played, but this looks crushing as well. If we take the rook, I think black gets in big trouble. Knight d6 check. Okay. So anyway, the rook retreated, but still there's a problem with c7 coming up. So f5, the bishop drops back for a moment, and now knight b5, sealing the king's exit, and then we have the combination now sequence on the back row. So to do with f8, so bang, rook takes e4, bishop takes e5, check, queen e7. A neat game. I thought it was a neat Nakamura game. So I hope you found some of these games interesting and got something out of them. So I hope you enjoyed that. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube, and see you next week, Tuesday, 8 PM, same time. Okay, thanks very much. Thanks for coming.